let's kick this bad boy off. Why don't we start by who wants to introduce themselves first? I don't know what the rank is, so to speak, but I think I met you first, right?
We met, after DCAC.
Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody that's listening, and just and then we'll let Zach do it, and then after that we'll talk about how we got here and what you guys do for a living. Is that fair?
Sure. Fair enough.
Go for it,
all right, perfect. David Velosa, Director of Commercial Operations for DPS. I'm responsible for global power, so anything outside of the U.S., developing those projects. Being with the company since 2000. We actually did the transition right through COVID, so interesting times. And electrical engineer, like you were talking, by trade, and been in the business for about 15 years, doing everything from diesel, HFO, natural gas, with data centers, any critical infrastructure.
And you're out of Miami, is that right?
I'm out of Miami, yeah.
Okay. DPS headquarters out of Miami too, or?
No, Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas,
yeah.
Makes a ton of sense. Zach, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Zach Zawilla, Vice President of Biz Development for DPS. Actually have a background in finance and accounting. Got into the energy industry about 9 years ago with a company that does something similar to what DPS does, temporary power, more on an international scale. And then DPS poached me to bring me over to help stand up their finance department over here. A few months into the job, they actually asked me to take over as a general manager back in March of 2022. And I ran that position up until April this year. Now we're getting a little bit bigger, and I'm focusing on biz development. Nice.
So tell us a little bit about, we're here today because you guys were huge partners of ours at DCAC Live. And how did it go for you guys this year?
It went excellent, man. Especially with the power constraints the industry's facing right now, it's a very big highlight. So everyone to walk past our booth had a question to ask and to really understand what our services are. But traffic was bar none, man. Definitely a lot of traffic.
Did you guys find the value in being, because this is your first time that you guys have partnered with us, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we attended back in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And then, after we attended, we need to do something, right? So we've been talking back and forth. This was the year. And I think it was a perfect opportunity because you guys were specifically talking about power, right? And
the whole, 1/3 of the entire conference was focused. The whole first day was basically focused only on power, right?
Right.
And then a lot of our speakers on day 2 had power to say and power to talk about. But we had a lot of power people that were there, a lot of engine groups and stuff like that are getting into it because the existential threat to the industry are people and power. And you guys are standing on in a really interesting situation. So tell us a little bit about your product, your offering of services, and use this as the opportunity to explain how you guys are the same as other groups, but also in all the ways in which you're different, right? It could be the way that you apply your services to these things or the way that you put applications together from a design perspective, but let people know because they saw you. If you look at most of the pictures, your logo is on every stage that we did for DCAC Live this year. And by the way, I hope it was worth the investment as partnerships.
100%. Yeah.
All right. So we say that because we hope to have other partners that want to continue to support, and we hope that they gain value from it as well. But let people know because they saw the logos, but it's hard unless they had the opportunity to walk by and talk to you guys in real time to fully unpackage what you guys do. And power is such a critical part of what we do that we needed an hour to unpackage exactly what you guys are doing because you're solving one of the greatest threats of our industry right now, which is the shortage of power, right? So talk to us how you guys play into that world.
So we started back in about 2018 providing services to the oil and gas sector, right? We were really good. We actually had a fleet of turbines and engines. That's, I guess, one of our big differences.
Were you guys doing rentals or were these setups and were these leases or were they?
It's a turnkey solution, right? So
What is a service or as a product itself? Were they capitalizing or?
Product itself, but I'd say we were probably, we've morphed into, we've morphed, right? But in 2018, we were that was probably still kind of rental really into, you started getting here a little bit.
Correct. Oil and gas, going out to the fields, renting things for a year or two until they were done and then bringing that stuff back in.
Correct.
All right. So that's very traditional, right?
Exactly. So then COVID hits and then, oil goes to negative, right?
Sure.
So we start getting calls like, hey, can I get out of this contract? And then we find opportunity on utilities, right? So doing summer peaking for utilities right across the border from the U.S.-Mexico border. And then we start seeing this as a trend, right? People are looking for turnkey solutions, service-based solutions, and I just want my hands off, right?
When you say people, you mean the utilities themselves.
The utilities.
So the utilities are coming to you and saying, hey, we need more temporary power or more perm power?
For now, temporary.
Okay.
It'll be just summer peaking, right? It'll be
Okay.
probably from June until September. Similar process that's happening in every other major.
What was the solution? Was it diesel or was it natural gas?
Always natural gas for us.
Always natural gas. Were you going mainly, well, if it was a utility, you're probably going turbines, right?
50-50. That's
Really?
Depends.
Yeah, it depends. So what differentiate us, and probably going like 3 questions ahead, is we actually come in and design a solution from the ground up. We're technology agnostic. Our fleet is 50-50. And then if a customer thinks that the best solution is a turbine, we'll go with a turbine. If they think a better solution is an engine, we go with an engine. And sometimes we've done engines and turbines at the same time. So for us, at the end of the day, is what technically makes more sense, what financially or economically make more sense. And sometimes it's just customer preference. Some people like turbines, some people like engines.
Yeah. Yeah, and like specifically, like, if you're working with utility, typically you're either playing the peak game or you're base loading the grid, right? And if you're base loading the grid for say 3-5 years, you probably do not want an engine. But for these short-term scenarios, they play
Recips are better.
because they're so much more fuel efficient, right?
Right.
So when you got 100 megawatts and you're running base load, the amount of fuel you're burning compared to a turbine is much less. And that's millions of dollars the customer's saving that they're essentially increasing their margin with, right?
Yeah, those things, if they're correct, what are the pros and cons or the tipping point between recips and turbines where, from what I understand, turbines are better in certain markets than others. Basically, temperature sometimes can be a factor where you have to derate it, right? Or if it's not at a steady state where you're doing base loading, then sometimes that engine is really sensitive to the cyclicality of the requirements from the IT load, right? Or in this case, from what you would have from a utility provider. And that peak shaving swing shifts could be really hard for it, right? So unless it's heavily loaded and stable in a cool environment, they're less ideal than what a reciprocating engine could offer you with more versatility and agility and flexibility in the way that you could use it as an application. Is that about right?
You're learning quick, huh?
Well, I've had to have enough nerds on here. Look, I went to public school. If you've been listening, I've been on the West Coast, so I have to learn everything I can about these things. And I've gone to a couple conferences to try to learn, but I'm trying to figure out where that sweet spot is, where it really applies to our vertical, right? Because our vertical will be entertaining 2 clients. The utility provider to support the enterprise end user or the operator themselves, or the operator and enterprise end user themselves, right? When they're building their own on-prem for a hyperscaler, or we are helping support these operators that are doing all the things that the hyperscalers can't do for themselves, right? But either way, it's going to be hard to I don't know. I'm waiting to be educated from y'all on when that big pivot, that shifting point happens, or where that sweet spot is between the tipping point. Okay, from this point forward, we should be using turbines instead of recips.
I mean, I think it's probably, it's an opinion, right? For me, it's kind of based on one load profile, the term of the project, and the size of the project. Power density can play into it too, right? If you don't have the much space, but those 3 things are really what plays into it for me. I mean,
so what are those variables that trigger one thing versus the other?
So for long term, you like a turbine because it's maintenance intervals, right? Its maintenance intervals are much more elongated than
and they're
recip.
bigger, so you're doing less maintenance. If you have, half a megawatt of engines and you need 100 megawatts, that's 200 engines. That's a lot of maintenance.
You're gonna have an army running around doing oil changes, right?
Right.
So that's with those extra pieces, that's extra pieces that can fail.
Yeah.
Turbines are designed really not to fail. But with that too, you get it's a more expensive piece of equipment. When you get into some of those higher nodes, creating redundancy becomes a bit more expensive. Some of them require water; the ones we use don't. And then the other thing of them is the recips. Not all the time, but I think a lot of the time they're more efficient than the turbines. So if you get
more efficient on fuel consumption,
exactly.
Yeah,
and
his
exhaust.
open cycle, usually a turbine engine is more efficient than a turbine.
Got you. So keep telling us more. I keep interrupting you because I'm fascinated by nerdy engine shit, as you know. But this is where the world's at right now, and we, I needed you guys on here too because you guys have to educate these people. Like everyone that's listening is like, I don't understand how that impacts me. So we're talking about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If we don't have power, there is no project, right? So I'm here focused on people, you're focused on power, and we're merging those two things together in a conversation. So you're willing to go anywhere and right size whatever they need based on term, load profile, and what was the last one?
Term, load profile, and
density. Was it density or was it size?
Size, project size.
That makes sense. So you guys figured out the sweet spot.
And again, this is an opinion, right? You're gonna get probably a lot of comments, but what we see is, anything below 50 usually it's an engine.
Mags.
Yeah, it's an engine. It's an engine, right?
Interesting.
Anything between 50 and probably 80 is kind of a gray area between a turbine and an engine, and then anything over 80 is just a turbine becomes more efficient. And we're talking about prime power, right? We're not talking about going up and down. We're talking about a data center load that is, pretty constant that we're going to see for several, and we're talking about several years, right?
Sure.
So again, kind of general terms is that, and that's how we see it, right? Other people might think differently.
So keep flexing on this stuff so people understand your not just relevancy, but your authority in this part of the world, right? In terms of engines, because everything, the last, I think it was a Goldman report that I read showed, I read this one like 3 or 4 months ago. It talked about how our industry would need 45 gigawatts of additional, the grid needs 45 gigs of additional power between now and 2030, which is, just over 5 years from now. And 27 gigs, or roughly 60% of that, would come from just natural gas, right? So the application for that is going to be either a turbine or a reciprocating engine. And the questions are, it's not just like what trigger point there are, but the functionality from an engineering application is one thing, but getting it through the entitlement process in any AHJ is going to be the other, right? So how hard is it to get a air permit for one turbine versus 100 recips, and what are the differences in when you have, because air permitting has got to be the longest pole in the tent for every engine, or is it the manufacturing of the product itself?
They're pretty much parallel right now.
Yeah. And what is the duration of I've seen engines at 50 weeks right now or more, 56 weeks I've seen them at, right? But I don't know what your platform runs at and how fast you could produce them, or what volume you can.
Yeah. The good thing with us is, right, we're owned by Caterpillar, right? 2 Caterpillar dealers, got a designation through Caterpillar Corporate. We only use Caterpillar recips, and then we only use Solar Turbines, which is a Caterpillar company.
And how big is that? How big are those turbines?
The turbines that we use from Solar range from 2.5 megawatts up to 38 megawatts.
38 megs. What's the largest recip you guys have?
1.9 megawatts.
1.9. Okay. So you guys you're owned by Cat?
Yeah.
So you standardize on their products?
Correct.
Got it. So and 38 megs on turbine and about just under 2 megs for recip is the biggest blocks you guys could run with right now? Yeah.
And Solar standardly, where they kind of got their bread and butter, I'd be interested to see the data point, because I bet you there's more Solar turbines installed in America than GE turbines. Okay. Now, I bet you there's, 10 times, maybe 100 times more megawatts installed from a GE standpoint than a Solar standpoint. But Solar owns that, that really small turbine market, whether it's doing some CHP applications at a university or a hospital. They also I think they have like a 90%, maybe even higher utilization of the gas compression market. So their turbines are proven, they're out there, and their US presence is bar none.
Are they more designed for commercial and industrial than they are utility?
I'd say, essentially what they're doing is, being designed for industrial, you're kind of replacing utility, right? So I think that's what more they were designed, was to go for behind the meter solutions. And now they're starting to morph, like this 38 megawatt turbine that they're building, and it's brand new.
Where are they building them at?
They actually build the turbine itself out in San Diego, California.
But it's in America?
Yeah. And then they package them here in Texas.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got a facility in DeSoto.
Okay. So good to know. Keep going. I'm trying to unpackage as much as I can for you guys.
Yeah, man. So I think that's what's slowed Solar's, essentially, them breaking through to the utility industries. They didn't have a turbine big enough, right? The utility industry, they're going after your big GE frame units. I mean, they want a 50, 80 megawatt turbine with this combined cycle on it. That's what they're looking for. And I think solar's starting to get into that form now. I'm really starting to focus on power generation when they might have more been focused on gas compression in the past.
So when you guys started, though, it sounds like you were just doing oil and gas stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
And then how did you evolve, and how much of your focus now is on mission critical or utility?
If you think about it, oil and gas is mission critical, right? So we did oil and gas, we did mining also, so critical facility, not mission critical, critical facility. We did utilities during summer peaking, right? If you don't have the exact number of megawatts on demand and supply, just the system breaks down, right?
Sure.
So you need to be able to support pretty much the whole grid.
So you guys were doing your own frequency response, on-demand response, and you guys were doing that in addition to selling the engines. You were offering that as a service to utilities as DPS?
But we don't sell the engines.
We don't sell any engines.
Yeah, but you sell the service of
the service, exactly. 100%.
So you basically are being paid to keep them there, not running unless the utility needs to turn them on.
It's all prime power. So what we do is prime power they use just during the summertime. Exactly.
All summer?
All summer.
Oh,
24/7.
So they turn them on during the summer. How many months do they run them for?
4 months.
Okay.
So, and that's,
wow.
And taking it a step back, I think what's really, the mission critical aspect of it, specifically this project we do in Mexico every summer, it's from June 1st to September 30th. We've done as much as, how many did you guys do there in 2021?
We've done overall 600 megawatts for the last 4 years.
In 1 year, we did
just in Mexico and in the
border towns
through Mexico. No shit.
And you don't get awarded the contract essentially until, second, third week of March. And from then until June 1st, you have to mobilize your product. And then for us, it gets even a little bit more complicated because we want to fly under temporary importation so that we don't trigger nationalization of the assets. And so we're not moving assets really over the border until late April, early May. And we have 30 days, 45 days to build our power plant and get it online. And our contracts have LDs that will trigger if we don't get online by June 1st. So that, that's if you ask, maybe not in terms of data center mission critical, but to us, that was pretty mission critical.
Incredible. All right. So you guys been doing that for a few years now?
For 4 years now. Yeah. Like Zach was saying, the biggest one we've had is 300 megawatts in just 60 days. We did, this summer, we did 100 megawatts in 60 days as well. And everything from...
What are the size blocks? Are you driven, is it 4 25 megawatt chunks that you're delivering? Is it...
In that case, we did it with the 1.9 megawatt engines. And then kind of, it's funny because coming back to your question, when you ask about which solution is better, sometimes, and as you guys know too, sometimes it's not even what is better, it's just what's available, right? For that customer in particular, we had engines available at that time.
Diesel?
No, natural gas.
So
natural gas.
Interesting.
So we had the pipeline right next to the site. We did a hot tap into the pipeline, built the internal pipeline to each one of the generators, connected that to a substation transformer, and delivered power at 69,000 volts.
We don't do any diesel projects. If you ask really nicely, we might consider it, but we're a natural gas company.
Hey, have you always been that?
No.
Okay. So when was that?
Well, DPS, I guess, has, so our sister company, Energy Rental Solutions, they're a cat dealer out of Houston. They serve the Gulf Coast, all the refineries and chem plants there. They handle diesel power, air compression, and temperature control. Once we started getting a natural gas leg, kind of before mine and David's time, David's been here. He's a dinosaur for DPS.
Years, he said.
Yeah. And,
just getting started.
And
exactly.
Right when they started Caterpillar Corporate, that's when David started. But no, that, and then once we invest in some natural gas equipment, that's when they rolled out DPS.
Gotcha. Okay. And it was just focused on natural gas, that sounds like, the whole time.
Exactly. And then we've kept that as a product offering and maintain that because we wanted to maintain emissions compliancy. And going with these tier 4 diesels, I mean, the market's saturated with the tier 4 diesels, and they're just insanely expensive. The lead
and there's
times.
it's untenable and it's untenable of a strategy in the long term because we can't scale off that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you were mentioning is emission, right? The emission permitting, right? So going back to the same question about products, the turbine gives you a much better emissions profile than an engine does, right? If we pair that with an SCR, which is, to control emissions, we can go as low as, or we can be at par with the utility if we go down with an SCR plus a turbine. So yes, the issue might be there for the permitting of that turbine or that power plant through emissions, and it's just an easier path with a turbine than it is with an engine, from our experience at least.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. About how much more, like percentage-wise, like 10% faster, 20% faster?
For us is, in our experience, 100% faster, right?
Really?
Yeah, because now you have a 16 megawatt block. That's the biggest one we use right now, mobile power, right? You put an SCR right next to it, and you have 16 megawatts with an SCR. That's it. If you have a 1.9 megawatt engine, you need to have an SCR per each one of those gensets. And now you need to have stack testing on each one of those engines. So it just becomes more and more complex. And for longer term projects, we see a turbine solution being much more quicker to permit than an engine solution.
So going back to where it started, when you guys were started, it was, hey, let's focus on the natural gas sector with this product. And this natural gas sector product that you were focused on was really supporting oil and gas as a vertical. And in your mind, that's mission critical. The mission critical industry tends to consider mission critical as anything that you could quantify the loss of 1 second of IT time if it goes down by at least $1 million or death, right? So you're right. I mean, some would argue that the utility provider itself is mission critical, but we know we're only getting 3 nines out of the utility at best, right? So that's not technically mission critical. Things that are mission critical are going to be 5 nines or more because they're writing 2 SLAs to support the load, right? So mission critical. I mean, I was talking to an investor yesterday that invests in all kinds of services companies, including software. And they're like, well, all of our software is mission critical. I'm like, isn't everything? Food and water sure is too, right? But the reality is in this industry, which is codified by the loss of downtime by death or $1 million per second in lost revenue. So if eBay went down or someone else that was streaming, we're talking about businesses that have their e-commerce businesses. They don't have a brick and mortar. When's the last time you went to the Amazon building? You know what I'm saying? Unless it's a data center. So my thing is there's this huge thing of what mission critical is, but you guys at what point started really paying attention then, let's call it data centers. At what point did you realize that the product that you were providing for peak shaving at a national level to, a vertical of energy of oil and gas that needed these things for what they pop up, because it's incredible how much money goes into that, right? But when did you stumble into the data center side, and how long ago was that?
So, to tell you the truth, it is, I meant not mission critical, but critical infrastructure, right? So,
okay.
So
sure.
What I was meaning was oil and gas, mining, utilities, petrochem as well.
Sure.
And also we got kind of pulled into data centers. I think back in 2021.
They're probably mission critical. They probably stop pumping oil and they lose $1 million a second for all I know.
Maybe. Oh, at least on the petrochemical job we did, that was a lot of money. But we got pulled into Ireland, right? So
Ireland.
Yeah. So that was when the utility started saying, okay, you want 100 megawatts, you need to bring 100 megawatts.
Yeah, AirGrid did the moratorium on energy.
Yep.
I just had their former CEO speak at DCAC in Dublin. It was 3 weeks after the one we did in Austin together. And he came in there and they're doing, it's actually more than that. I want to say for every 100 megawatts you need to put 150 online now.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, they need yours, plus you need to provide 50 back to the grid. At least 50% of what you're putting online needs to be. Yeah.
So even better for our business, though.
Yeah. But who brought you over there? Was it a hyperscale enterprise end user? Was it an operator that took you over there because you're a part of their supply chain in the United States? What was it? And if you don't have to name them, but what those operators and there's end users, those are the 2 biggest consumers of what we're doing, right?
We had operators, end users, and also a partner bring us over. Our vendor actually brought us over there. We use an Irish company to help on some labor support for our power plants. And they actually, they're headquartered right like kind of where, right near Dublin where they're building all the data centers. They brought us over there for that. I started getting involved a little bit in them in a past life. In 2018, we started chasing the data center specifically in Ireland. It was
2018?
Yeah, it was kind of where before they really opened the gates like they have the past couple of years. So that when we were chasing them, then it was really hard to get any traction. We knew the power was a problem, not as bad as it is now, right? But it was really hard to get some traction. But we were working with some well-known guys that I would say are smaller guys now, And then when we got, after this all happened and, 2021 of what was going on over there, and then July 2022 when the Dominion bell rang, that's when really the floodgates opened.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. When Dominion in the United States said what's up, that's when natural gas started becoming the sexiest thing in the room, right?
Yeah. I remember waking up like late July 2022, get on my email and just an influx.
The gold rush started.
I'm like, and in our world, that's when you turn on the Weather Channel and I'm like, okay, where the hell did a hurricane hit? Where's an earthquake at? And that's, but I was like, Virginia, man, it's like, this is in Puerto Rico. And, so that's, and it was just utility, forecasted incorrectly.
That makes sense. So a couple of years ago is when it really got, I think that's when everyone started realizing the product is no longer just the space power and cooling of the MEP. It's the energy that comes with it or the power that comes with it. So, finding the biggest challenge, like I had a group that provides energy as a service, invite me to a generator conference in Florida, right? And it's all natural gas stuff. It was just one generator provider. And I went there for the first time to learn more about the oil and gas industry and the way that they transact. Because would you say that the way that the oil and gas industry operates is different than the way the data center industry operates?
I'll say 100%. Yeah.
100%. And those that operate just in an oil and gas mentality that are trying to play in this side that don't realize that there's a difference are learning it the hard way right now by probably struggling, right? Look, there's so much demand for your product. Why isn't everyone adopting it? And the truth is because you have the greatest technology on this earth, but if no one understands who you are, they're going to have a hard time betting. You're talking about massive volumes of aggregate power, life-changing decisions made for someone in that role because they're spending millions of dollars today and committing to millions of dollars in the future of spend for this product. And if they do wrong, then they will be sacked. So people are like, okay, how do I figure out how to make a decision that doesn't get me murdered when I don't know enough about this? Because you guys are really coming on scene in 2022, right? So we've had a couple of years to where everyone's prevalent and we're two emerging industries now, which is why 1/3 of our conference was power. Because there's so many players out there that they'll overstate their capabilities. Like I've asked groups like if you're talking to a large operator, right? And we work for most of the large operators at some capacity. They're trying to figure out, do I do 4 100 megawatt power plants to support my 100 megawatt data center that I'm going to build next to it? Or do I put 40 megawatt power plants, but do 10 of them instead, right? Which one's going to get me through the entitlement process faster? What is the limitation? What is the category limitation before I flag something? How many megawatts can I put together before I trigger something that says, hey man, that's too much and you need to have some sort of emission standard? Does that make sense? But we're building a very new application for natural gas to a product that is evolving for what the needs are almost on a monthly basis. Do you agree?
Yeah.
So we have to define where that sweet spot is. And you guys are everyone has a product, like you guys have a product in design 1.9 to whatever it was 30, or you have guys that run around with Wordzillas that are this or that, you know what I'm saying? So you're trying to figure out what is the right application.
So talking about kind of our history and our transition, we did oil and gas, we did utility, we did petrochem, and then we were working with Caterpillar hand by hand, right? Because we were owned by 2 cat dealers, right? But back in 2023, I think it was December 2023, Caterpillar designated us as a GPP, which is a global power provider. That means that any major Caterpillar customer in the world
that needs power
will come to Caterpillar, and Caterpillar will call us, right?
I've done a big peak shaving program like the one you're talking about in Brazil, in Parana, Curitiba, and it was Caterpillar. They were a manufacturing plant making tractors and everything down there, but they needed to put enough power online to support the manufacturing plants that they operated. And they said, by the way, if you in the utility grids need some energy, we'll backfeed you too, right? So Cat's done a great job of getting out ahead of these things.
Exactly. So, and then coming back to your question about people making decisions and, understanding that those decisions are going to be millions of dollars and are going to have repercussions from years to come. One of the things that we do, because we're part of the Caterpillar group, is our reputation, right? So for us is, hey, we're going to sit down with you. We're going to design engineer this, right? So you and I feel comfortable because it's your name and my name out there, right? And we're going to do it the right way, right? We might not be the cheapest solution, but I assure you we're going to be the best, right? So that's the way we approach kind of this industry. And I think we've been successful with that approach, right? You know, taking care of your reputation, my reputation, and doing the things the right way.
So tell me, like, you guys have been on scene for a few years now, and everyone's coming up to you, and you guys are probably getting it pulled in every direction. Walk me through, you know, what do you do when these people come on the regular? I'm going to need a gigawatt in 3 years. I mean, like, what is the capacity that you can support, you know, in terms of scaling? And because you guys may have a product, there's so much power needs out there that even if you took all of your capacity, there's at least one customer out there that could take it all. And that's not ideal as a business, is, you know, to have all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So walk us through the trends that you're seeing in this industry from the engine perspective or the power side, specifically natural gas. What are you seeing? What's coming at you from the enterprise or the operator? And you don't have to tell us anything that's specific that's going to get you in harm's way, but paint with a broad stroke here. What is the trend of the industry that you're seeing from the inside out? Because most of the ecosystem is on the outside of this industry looking in on power. Like, I had to go to a conference or two just to understand the language of what happens and what things that are good or bad regarding one engine or the other. So, like, the thing is what are you saying? And what are people coming to you with that are realistic and unrealistic, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say our pipeline is hot right now. Very hot. Looks very, very healthy. But you know, most importantly, you know, like our first customer that we've done this prime power data center with in Virginia, 130 megawatts for a 5-year contract that
as a service, they're not owning the engines. They don't take care of the maintenance.
It's as a service. Energy as a service, essentially. And, you know, we're only on month 8 and we already want to ink an extension for after month 60. So, you know, but what I'll say is, you know, that customer, man, I mean, even going back to 2 years ago, they still had so much homework done compared to customers coming to us today still. You know, and that's
really, was it a data center customer or an enterprise customer?
Yeah, it was a data center.
Because these data center companies are armed to the teeth right now, and they normally have some pretty sophisticated people on the procurement side of these things.
And this one has, you know, when the other one's got armed, this one built an army. You know, so they're still miles ahead, I'd say. But, you know, there's for me, it's 3 toll gates that these customers, you know, they really need to get through before they really see if the project can even happen and make that, you know, hey, I need 200 megawatts. Hey, I need that gigawatt. Make that feasible for someone like us. First is the air permit. You know, you need to figure out your air permit and what that looks like. And we're here to help you with it. But as an end user, you have to be the one that files for that air permit.
But you have to guide them. You can't be like, look, it's your problem. Figure it out. But here's my engines.
Exactly. No. I mean, you know, and then we coordinate the testing and everything. I mean, we leverage what they call BACT, best accepted controls technology for the turbines. So we got the best that you can get out there that can get you the most megawatts installed under the threshold you're given, right? But that's step 1. Step 2, which is probably even harder to get an air permit right now, is fuel. You know,
interesting.
How close are you to a pipeline, and you know, can you tap into that pipeline? And if you tap into that pipeline, what's that capacity look like? So and what we're noticing now, and specifically in the Virginia region, that's capacity is pretty hard to get. So I think you're going to start seeing some people make their site selections going to be more on where's their less restrictive, you know, let's go to an attainment zone, right, versus a non-attainment zone, and then where's some fuel, where's some cheap and plethora of fuel.
Okay, because what are you offering today as a strategy or solution regarding storage? Like, diesel engines typically have enough fuel in a belly tank to run, you know, without refueling arbitrarily here 72 hours, right? Natural gas, does it have the need? You say capacity is the challenge. Is it just to hook up into a header and that's the only thing that has to do? Or is there some sort of storage capacity that's on-prem that has some sort of takeoffs around it or offsets around it that you have to put to make it to where you could have access to some runaway?
Well, I'd say, you know, you can do on-site storage, right? And how much is that, you know, but how much on-site storage do you want for backup? I mean, that gets, you know, with typically what we see with these customers is space.
It's hedging the market too, right? By storing.
It is, but I mean, typically, you know, if you're going to store it and you're going to get it shipped there, you're probably paying 10 times what it costs to just get it out the pipe, right? That's when you're kind of leveraging a virtual pipeline. So you're and then you can only store CNG because you're storing LNG. It doesn't store that well, right? You depending on when you go to use it, you're going to have to vent it to atmosphere.
But those are the questions that we're answering for our customers, right?
So when they call you and I need power, you have to go through all this.
Exactly. So, and if you look at from a customer perspective, right, they already have diesel gensets on site, right? And they already have fuel storage on site, and they already have UPSs on site. Now, coming back to your question about which technology is better, turbines can do dual fuel. So we can actually run on diesel or natural gas. So that's an option that we can run through those turbines. And, what is the probability that something major is going to happen through, I don't know, a 20, 30-inch pipeline running natural gas? Those are very slim, right? But if the customer, again, going back to your mission critical, right? If the customer thinks that that's a higher likelihood, we can run those turbines either on natural gas or diesel as prime power for our customers. So those are the questions and the tough questions that we get from our customers. We're able to say, hey, this is the best way to do it if that is your main concern.
And even if you tap into the pipeline, you get the capacity, and there's another step because that might be interruptible capacity. But ultimately, you're right. If you're a data center, you want uninterruptible capacity. But that's pretty hard to get right now, especially in a lot of jurisdictions. I mean, that's hospitals, that's schools, right? That's who's getting that. In these data centers, they think that that's ultimately what they want, but it's hard to get. So
well, the data center would probably be the last person on the totem pole to get anything, right?
Exactly. Well, I mean, they want to be.
You're going to have residential, military bases, hospitals, things like that come first.
Exactly.
And then data centers have to be the very last thing, which would make sense if you went to a turbine model where you have natural gas as the primary and diesel as the backup. Right. As long as there's not a problem with your turbine, you're going to be fine. But if you have a problem with your turbine,
you're probably going to have more problems with your engine than your turbines. Again, back to availability and reliability. The numbers for a turbine and an engine are completely.
But are people coming to you and saying, hey, look, I want, we know like of that 27 gigawatts of natural gas, the rest is, between wind, solar, and other, right? Maybe hydrogen. But of that 27 gigs, there's going to be a certain percentage of people that are going to build it because the utility will never arrive. That'll only be primary. It'll on-prem primary solution with a grid connection request that'll sit out there on the grid for 7 years before anybody understands what to do with it, right? But that power that's coming, will you see them coming up and asking for natural gas as the primary, since that'll be the place of the utility, but still using diesel engines as a backup?
I think is the most cost-effective right now, looking at technology and what can be deployed fairly quickly, quote unquote, right? Because again, we can dig into this more, but it's not only the turbine; it's more things around the turbine, right? But something that is economically feasible, that those hyperlocators or those customers can pass through the end user, it has to be a gas. It has to be a gas solution, right?
So listen, a lot of power requirements. What's it driven from? AI. Right? I mean, cloud's a monster too. We can't even solve cloud's power problems yet. Now we're getting in with AI power problems, which we haven't really had to deal with yet, because out of the 3 different types of AI data centers, learning and inference and live ones, we really only have inference and learning ones still, right? And one of them has a lot less latency sensitivities than the other one, and then the other one's just a smaller cluster. But we haven't had to solve for that massive volume of aggregate power demand yet from an operator perspective. We're getting there. My question for you is, what are you seeing from a turbine adoption rate from an AI platform of load? Because the volatility, okay, so basically someone goes in and they have an AI prompt with a question, and it wakes up the cluster, and then it starts firing like a brain would, and it starts getting really spiky to the point where there's no utility provider that would want that type of lead and lag frequency swings onto their utility grid. So they'll open up a connection. So what engines can handle that? What AI, I know we're building for big volumes of blocks, but what if we can't get the turbines to marry up to the load of AI? Do you see that as being a problem?
I think you've seen that more than I do, right, lately?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to need a bigger block of turbine for sure. I mean, an industrial turbine, maybe some of your larger aeroderivatives, but I think that's really, that's going to be what you need. And then, you get into the field where do you have a spinning reserve going all the time, right? Do you just need to basically have, say it's 100 megawatt AI data center, right? Do you essentially need 100 megawatts of turbines running all the time, no matter what amount of load they're being demanded right now, because at some point it could be demanded at 100, right? And turbines aren't instantaneous like a diesel engine or close to instantaneous like a diesel engine, right? So I think, I'm a big proponent of turbines for them over engines. Engines, some of your bigger engines could probably handle it, but your smaller ones, I mean, especially when you get into the engines that we use, and some of the others that are out there on the market for this style that are efficient, they don't necessarily handle those load steps as well as the turbine does.
Well, I imagine the turbine would be more sensitive than a reciprocating engine, I thought, no?
Oh, no.
No, because the turbine spins at, I think it's like 3,600 RPMs versus 1,800 on an engine. So you have, and you have a bigger mass running much faster,
Twice
right?
as fast.
Exactly.
But,
and I think it's probably not even 36, probably 3,600. No, probably 36. It's crazy. I mean, these things are spinning high.
I got you. So you're not worried.
You have that mass, and is harder to stop that mass on a turbine than it is to stop on an engine, right? So it's.
I was in one of our turbines control rooms when we were commissioning our plant up in Virginia. There's 16 megawatt turbines. We have 8 of them up there. And one of the nights, our chief engineer, he's actually comes from an engine background. And this was kind of, he was with us for about a year and a half at this point. He's seen some turbines work, but not at a plant this scale. And they threw 16 megawatts at a 16 megawatt turbine. And, it barely drooped on the frequency side.
Because you fully loaded it. If it's not fully loaded, then it's going to have some issues.
But this is from 0 to 16 to full load.
But that's what I'm saying. You could step load it fully loaded, but if you were running it at 4 megawatts, it would run less optimal, wouldn't it?
So we're talking about, I guess, two different things. One is the
turbine's designed to be fully loaded, right? Where you get more out of it the higher it's loaded, correct?
Engines too. I mean, you want a 50% load really on any piece of equipment mostly. I mean, you can go lower, and we've even proven that on both sides of the equipment. But the manufacturer typically recommends a 50% load.
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. On an AI load, it may spike to 160% demand of load from 0 instantaneously, right? So I know that there's going to be a lot of things we have to continue to work on. You guys are going to have to contribute to that solution because, the IT nerds are going to try to figure it out from the rack side. They're going to put some sort of capacitor probably in line with the rest of the load that absorbs that, because it's such a fast switch. You're talking about micro milliseconds, and you can damage stuff really quickly. So there has to be something that's there. But look, at some point we'll continue to have these conversations because as we continue to evolve as an industry, you're going to start seeing, how many means and methods and applications are you applying to requests for that are the same? They're probably all different, right? Everything is so different. There's a little bit of standardization. There's a little bit of a sweet spot, but it's like the pitcher. He's throwing the ball all over the plate. It's not the same spot every time, right? So are you seeing in your trends, where's the puck going? What are we going to do here on this thing? Do you see us slowing down? Do you see this thing getting to a different fixed form factor or standardization on block sizes? What do you see?
To your point, right? I think, what we've seen with this, a lot of especially in North America, a lot of the data centers, it's, depending on which node you're at, say you're at 50, 100, 224. It's pretty similar in a lot of them that the way they design their data halls. So our offering, we can get it, our cookie cutter can be 80% there for almost anybody right now, and that's for cloud-based data centers.
That makes sense. What do you guys, so is your primary product now understanding, the engines, is it as a service though? DPS? Is everything as a service? Yeah. So you guys you're doing the same thing. Was it VoltaGrid was at the conference as well? They're as a service provider only. They don't sell engines. They just sell it as a service.
Correct.
Okay. There's other groups out there
with a little spin on our end, right?
Yeah.
That, we are 50-50 split between engines and turbines, right? We have companies that have a big fleet of engines and do a little bit of turbines. Some other companies that have a lot of turbines and a little bit of engines, but I think we're the only one that has kind of a 50-50 split. And again, coming back to technology agnostic,
right?
Correct.
Some people are only one or the other, but you guys have access to the diesels through your relationship with CAT?
Diesel or natural gas.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then having that close relationship with Caterpillar, having that close relationship with Solar, which are the equipment manufacturer. And then another thing we forgot to mention is, I mean, we're pretty much agnostic, right? I think, the biggest block of power that Solar produces right now is 38 megawatts, sorry. But if we need to put a GE
so
turbine, we'll do a GE turbine. If the customer, depending on the size. And again, it is a cookie cutter, like Zach was saying, but a lot of these factors, if it's an AI load, makes a huge difference, right? This is fairly new.
Yeah.
Seeing those swings is
we
fairly
haven't
new.
seen that yet. Yep.
Yeah, it's like, and it's going to move out of the cookie cutter. To David's point, like, doing what we did up there, I think can make sense for call it a 3 to 10 year solution. When you start going over 10 years, it's like, let's close the cycle. Let's get this thing more efficient. Is this technology that we chose the right technology? And that's when all those questions come into play. And that's where we might have, we'll absolutely ride the horses that we ride first. But if we have to go another route, we'll have to look at that.
Okay.
And going back to your question, what we do is from zero to the end, right? So if we need to do a bridge power solution for 3 years, that is usually what it takes to do a permanent power plant with combined cycle. We'll do that so our customers win that race to revenue, right?
Bridge ourselves.
Exactly. And we'll bridge ourselves and then put a long-term solution with a combined cycle or whatever makes technical and financial sense for the customer. So it's more than just energy as a service. It's working with the customer to understand the long-term perspective.
And that solution right there would pair very well with the load ramps of these data centers. So that's like one of the things that, as we talk to our customers, that they struggle with is, well, I don't need 100 megawatts until year 3, so why would you install it on day 1? Well, at the same time, are you going to change any of your commissioning protocols? Because essentially you want this whole power plant installed so you can run your commissioning process through it and get your customer to sign off on it. And then that's when they kind of scratch their heads and they're like, oh shit, that's right.
Oh, because they can't add and scale incrementally like a Caterpillar later on without having to go through a whole new...
We could, but you're going to have to take an outage.
You can't shift to another engine or a temporary roll-up while you test the system?
You'll be testing on hot, and that's not very safe.
So interesting. So you're saying that you have to kind of install everything that you want day 1, minute 1 for future proofing?
It depends. I mean, right now, what we're seeing from the way that our customers will need to commission for their customers, yeah.
Interesting. So that's another factor that's probably going to have to be addressed.
Exactly.
Because people aren't going to be happy about that. Yeah. You're not going to go tell your clients, hey, by the way, dude, you want to keep on scaling? I got to put your stuff on engines for a little bit while I bring out my entire system again. And I mean, we don't necessarily do that now, right? If we're scaling now and adding more diesel and doing things, we commission at a modular level and then implement it back into a shared infrastructure backplane, right? So re-ringing out the entire system is something that I haven't seen have to happen very often, right? So, well, let's shift gears off of this stuff and let's talk about we'll spend a couple minutes scratching the paint with the topic because I see natural gas as the bridging component for the next 5 to 7 years. But I do think that there's going to be a few things that emerge. I don't know. I do think SMRs are going to be a big part of what we're going to do in the future. I come from a nuclear Navy that has 75 plus years, technically 76 years of experience, 34 different types of nuclear reactor propulsion systems, hundreds of refits and refuels. And we've demonstrated the ability to not only steam on a reactor for 20 years or 1 million miles, but we can do a lot of things, without refueling. SMRs will be there at some point. What's your thoughts on that? And if so, if you disagree, then what do you think will be the long-term solution? Is it like figuring out how to, I'm not sure if harnessing solar is the challenge since we don't have the ability to store it, but there's maybe something that happens there that makes it more efficient. I don't know. I mean, what do you think is going to be the ultimate solution to get us in 10 years from now? Where do you see us?
I'll go second. You go first.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a mix, right? I think the cake is so big that you need to give everybody a piece, right? So definitely, natural gas will be there.
The biggest contributor.
Yes. Solar will be there, wind will be there, and those mainly because of ESG components, right? Reactor is going to be there at some point. I think right now the thing that they're battling more is kind of the customer perspective, or the people's perspective, right? That this is not safe. I don't want to be near it. So they're
not in my backyard, not over here either.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are all optics. That's all bullshit.
And then permitting issues, right? So lately we've been seeing a lot of these big customers signing agreements to repower nuclear facilities, right? But some of those have
been shut down. Yeah, you've seen those.
Exactly.
I mean, I've seen a lot of statements that we're doing this, but I've also seen a few on the fourth page where people are like, yeah, that got rejected. They're not doing that now.
Exactly.
Right? So
and then
it's going to take a little bit.
And then that goes back into fear. So you look at why was that happening? FERC was looking at, or was scared that prices were going to go up or reliability was going to go down, right? So it is an issue. It's a
I don't think
public
those are the
opinion
only two factors. I think that's the factor. It's the fear of the public opinion propaganda that didn't do a good enough job bifurcating the difference between nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. And I think that it's regulation that is driven by politics and public opinion and fear. But I think that there will be maybe some things that shift in regulation over the next administration. You never know. I mean, he was just on Joe Rogan talking about nuclear, and it's inevitable. It's a part of our future. It's just we have to find ways to adopt ESG standards. We don't want to compromise one thing for the other, but there are certain things in regulation that we're just taxing the shit out of Americans for decisions that Asia is doing. India and China represent 2/3 of the world's population, thus 2/3 or more of the world's pollution. And we could remove all the straws we want from here, but we could be as clean as we want. But unless you get the rest of the world to play ball, which is why we're shifting a lot of our manufacturing back over here, because we can control the pollution and the waste that comes as a byproduct of making things. But I do think that regulations will be shifted as 75 years of steady state information that comes from this type of technology, right? It's not brand new. We probably have the capability to do these things right here, right now. It's just that the regulation is lacking, I think. And I think that it's just old fears, old propaganda, shit that I do hope that there's someone that gets ahead of the narrative and says, cool, either stop using and adopting emerging technologies or start getting used to having SMRs somewhere, within 100 miles of your house, you know what I'm saying? Or closer,
Yeah.
Look at you guys are insane. Was it another guy I was just talking to? Like everywhere a submarine hooks up to in the United States, it's putting shore power back on the grid, which means it's got a reactor that's backfeeding the grid at any one time, right? So like we've been doing this for years. We can do this safely. If we didn't, then you'd hear about nuclear reactors sitting on the bottom of the ocean from the Navy, and you just don't see that happening, right? So it's a human thing, right? It's just training, conditioning. But I think that this piece of technology is going to be a big part of our future.
Agreed. And you touch on so much that we need to do another podcast just on that one. But
I'm doing a podcast series called The Road to Nuclear. So go get your pencils and get your shit together, because I'm going to bring on anybody that can help me unpackage more natural gas shit and what we're doing to get to the adoption rate of nuclear.
More than happy. Yeah. 100%. But then we're seeing that fear on natural gas as well, right?
Really?
Yeah. Just because of those ESG back again. So all of these big companies have their environmental, goals that they're looking to be net zero by 2030 or 2040, 2050, right? This goes completely against what they're trying to achieve, right? Even if they do PPAs with solar.
Yeah, there's only so many of those.
Exactly. So we're actually fighting, or not fighting. I mean, they're looking at this and saying, hey, there's not enough power, right? Our only option right now is natural gas power, but that goes against our ESG. And we also have investors like BlackRock, every other big investment that has their own ESG goals. So going back to fear is that fear of, hey, this is the only option that we have, but we cannot go because of this, right? So
I always thought that natural gas fit into that renewable section to where it met all the ESG requirements.
No, you think,
but
no.
And to David's point, like a lot of these a lot of these data centers, their financing packages associate them meeting these goals by X date. So, you can look at it, throwing out a nerd finance term, but, you can look at it as almost like a covenant to your banking syndicate, right? If I'm not sure what happens with it, when along the terms of their agreement, but if they don't meet those goals and say they go to do, a fossil fuel powered data center, does that make them default on their financing?
No, because a lot of this shit is self-imposed and we govern on intent, meaning they're doing their best, but how do they know they're going to be able to keep? That's why they're like, hey, arbitrarily in 12 years from now, we're going to be 100%, because that's the goal. But I mean, what if technology doesn't lend itself to that capability? And I mean, we were talking about air grid, right? So you have 3-party system over there. One party is the green system that came in and said, yeah, you could have anything you want as long as it's carbon neutral from day one. You're like, that's impossible. Right? There's zero possibility of that. That's the moratorium. So they're like, all right, well, listen, let's figure this out. You have to try to achieve as close to zero as you can. We'll tolerate a window of X, and you have this much time to improve upon it as you iterate over the course of the next 10 years. That's the solution. Regulation is what drives that change, right? So you'll see that regulation is what shut down Ireland for the data center industry. And if they don't get their shit together, then yes, most of the people in Europe that build data centers, they still come from Ireland. They just won't be building them there. Right, they're going to be building them everywhere else, and that's going to be that'll be a huge loss and deficit for Ireland because they jumped out in front as one of the preeminent markets in all of Europe for this industry, and now you have politics that really are putting them in a holding position where they can't. They have the labor that's most proficient at delivering data centers, and they don't have the ability to do it in their backyard right now.
Yeah, it's like I doubt that they'd default on the loans, but I could see a situation where it's like, hey, I'm going to lend you this money for X. But if you don't meet those goals, I'm charging you Y.
I can see that, the clawbacks and punishments that come from their capital partners. But like that's a first world problem with a lot of people that deal with billions of shit. Who cares about them and their problems?
Exactly.
Right? We're worried about consumers and labor forces and solving that shit. And right now we have 18 to 24-year-olds that are spinning their wheels and not sure how to contribute. And they're going to outnumber baby boomers in the workforce before the end of this year. So we have to figure out, okay, man, you were born with this technology in your hands. You're the driver of the adoption rate of emerging technology. Come help us solve for this and bring your big fat brain and all the creative shit that you got from learning this technology with you, right? Because we need to solve for this power problem, but we need more people, and people have to be passionate enough to build a career around these types of things, which means it has to be financially creative. People are going to, not everyone's going to do this because they want to. I'm a tree hugger too, as I make jokes about tree huggers, but like that's not enough. You know what I'm saying? Like we have to actually do real shit and make big changes.
And maybe that's where environmental and social clash, right?
Yeah.
But what we see today is looking at public opinion, looking at, emissions, looking at communities around those data centers, right? Looking at, hey, is my bill going to go high, which is the usual go-to, right? All of those are the ones that the data center customers are fighting right now. And we see that rate of adoption not going as quickly as we would expect just because of that demand, right?
I think a lot of people, it's a herd mentality in this industry if you've not seen it. Imagine you're seeing this huge swimming pool right now and you have all the operators and enterprise end users standing out in front of it, waiting for the first person to jump in. And then there's always, 4% of the market are always the most innovative, Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point model. So if you look at that, those 4 to 7% of the industry that get it, they're going to be the first ones to jump in and they do cannonballs, and they'll get the best deals on what you're doing, they'll be the first ones to adopt the SMRs and really start incorporating that in their model. But once it happens, everyone's jumping in that, and then it'll just be the first disruptor of any element of market or industry will be the first one to gain from it, and then everyone else that follows will be the ones that institutionalize and create it as a standard. So that's how we advance the standards of this industry.
Agreed. And then, at least from my perspective, since I'm in charge of global power, we're seeing this in Ireland. We're seeing this in Asia. We're seeing this in South America, right? So who's gonna be able to be that innovator, right? We have one already here in the U.S., but who's going to be the one taking the next step? And
who's
then
the one in the U.S., by the way?
Okay. NDAs, right? NDAs.
All right, I got you. All right, well, that's fine. Hey, well, listen, do this because we're wrapping this one up. You have to talk about. The last thing you want to do is put yourself in a bad situation talking about anything on this space. This is we want to educate the industry. That's why we're having this conversation. We're having this conversation because you guys are supporters of DCAC. You guys came to the conference. I encouraged, this came with part of your guys' sponsorship package, and hopefully you're finding just as much value out of unpackaging this with who you are as a business as you did by coming and supporting us in person with your booth. But we want to educate this industry, and in doing so, it allows you guys to be perceived as an authority in this industry that knows more than others. There's not a lot of people out here that do what you're offering. Right. But I've had a few of them on this show, and it lets, the audience gets to figure out what they're listening to and who's, what's different between one group or the other. But I'll tell you, this is a conversation that we have to have more often, and we need to be advancing this side. This is the side, power and people. I care about those two things. I care about people a lot more than power. But if I solve the people problem, I could help solve the power problem, right? So these conversations we're going to continue to drive. And the last thing I would say is, not the last thing, but I would say, tell people anything that you haven't told them yet about DPS. Like if someone came up and said, what does DPS do? What do you tell them? How would you answer that question?
We bring the power.
Okay. A lot of people do that, but you do it as a service. Hey, you just tell us how much power you need. We're the easy button for all of it. We show up, deliver the whole thing. You don't have to worry about anything except you'll be receiving the power. That's it.
Yeah. I'll say the best way I can put it is leasing a car versus Uber, right? Or Lyft. I don't want to do any puns, right? But when you lease a car, you're making a payment, but you're responsible for maintenance. You're responsible for driving that car. You're responsible for fueling that car, right? Yeah. For us, it's Uber, right? It is point A to point B. We're responsible for maintaining that car, making sure
you just get it there.
Exactly. So for us, it's a seamless service for the customer, right? They just tell us, hey, this is what I need, and this is what I need to get. And we go with you the whole way, right? Again, you can pick an SUV, you can pick a sedan, you can pick whatever you want. The price is different, but tell us what you want. We'll sit together and see what the best solution for you is.
Well said. I like the way you position that. So go ahead. What do you want to add?
I was going to say, I think another thing too that really, differentiates us is just our people and our background. We have a little over 50 people in the company right now that are full-time. And I bet you no state has more than 4 people in there. Everybody has very diverse backgrounds from all different areas of the industry. But what we do, when we were talking about Mexico and the speed that we do it, now the way that we look at and build what we'll call a semi-permanent plant, and when we get to build a permanent plant, the way we look at that will be completely different than say a Black & Veatch or a Burns McDonald's looking at building the permanent plants that they've been building, because it's not going to take us 24 to 36 months. It's going to take us 14 to 18. We'll figure that out somehow, and we'll figure out how to make that shorter. And I think what really drives that, and what drives that kind of contention within our own business, is just our team's passion, from the commercial team to the technicians to engineering to our president. Everyone's got a passion for this business on DPS.
You have to in this industry. This is the greatest time to be in this industry. I always tell people, I think it's pretty punk rock. We're in the Wild Wild West right now. You got into 2022? How much has the industry changed since you got here?
A lot.
Try to imagine what it's going to look like in 2 more years from now, right? So this is an exciting time. So listen, anything else you guys want to add or leave for the listeners? How can they reach out to you? How do they contact you?
dpsenergy.com. We have also a LinkedIn page where we usually post a lot of what we do. We just recently pushed a really good video about our 100 megawatt project in Mexico, about our turbine experience here in the US. So if you go there, or our LinkedIn profile, it'll be perfect. No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I think the way you approach this, kind of with open mind and asking questions and trying to understand is kind of the best way, right? And then for us to be able to maybe change your thoughts here and there.
Look, I'm an idiot, so I don't know shit.
You're not.
Well, listen, I'm a student, and this is religion to a lot of people. So I could talk to some people, and they're disciples of a different idea altogether, right? So,
let's put it. You're a quick learner. I like that better.
Well, I appreciate it. I got great teachers that are educating me along the way. And so, listen, I really appreciate it, guys. This has been great. This was necessary for the industry. I hope that there's people that are listening that can, better understand what their role is in this industry and how it impacts or is impacted by this. And let's also be honest. I hope that there are people that are listening who have children who are not sure what they want to do with their careers, but they're 18 to 24, and maybe they're in college or maybe they're figuring it out. But as they can hopefully hear, there's so much pent up demand for what you're going to be delivering. 27 gigs of natural gas in the next 5 years. That's just in addition to what you're already doing.
Right.
I think that people should see opportunity, and they should see that it's a safe place to go park their passion, their talent, and build a career from. Right.
100%, man. This is definitely the coolest industry I've been a part of by far.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't imagine being in any other one right now. But listen, let me say this. Thank you for the tequila. Thank you for the coffee. Tell me a little bit about this coffee before I hang up. You gave me this coffee for a very specific reason.
Yeah. So I was born in, you can notice my accent throughout the podcast, right? I was born and raised in Colombia, South America. Big passion for coffee. I was born in the coffee region in Colombia, right? And one of the things I've been trying to do for quite some time is take that stigma about Colombia and drugs, right? You think about Pablo Escobar and et cetera. And Colombia is more than that, right? So we have coffee, we have emerald, we have flowers. So all the roses you give to your significant others in Valentine's
Come from Colombia?
Usually most of them come from
Nice.
Colombia, right? So I'm trying to change that, right, and change the conversation. So every time I meet someone like you, I like to bring the best coffee from my perspective out of Colombia, and then it has a little bit of mug that says Colombia. So whenever
I love it, man. I'm honored. Thank you so much for the gifts. And when I develop our own podcast studio, we'll put it right there on display with the coffee cup. So I appreciate it.
Perfect.
Thanks for coming in, guys. Thanks for joining the Data Center Revolution. Thank you for all your support to Data Center DCAC Live. I hope to have
Thank
your
you, man.
support again next year.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to 25.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.